which Tourget always considered the linchpin of all the other ideas. We don't have time to go into disenfranchisement discussion particularly here, but the disenfranchisement to Tourget would necessarily lead to the elimination of all the other meaningful rights.
But I think as you're mentioning his language, his debates, I will just note with the debates that we're going to do tonight, the language does sound like something that we would be talking about today. And I think that's part of what, as you're talking about this, that it's still very current, his way of thinking, understanding issues around race relations and equality. Caroline, when you think about the literature, what do you see in terms of its political influence? You've talked about it so far as a kind of as a uniqueness in literature, but what about its political influence?
That's a really good question. I think Mark sort of hinted at or talked a little bit about that. These novels were tremendously influential politically. I mean, these days a novelist would give his right arm to have that kind of influence. A Fool's Errand sold 150,000 copies the first year, and in the 1880 election, the Republican campaign committee printed up whole sections of the novel and distributed them as campaign documents. And Republican speakers quoted the novel again and again on the stump. And Bricks Without Straw was published just a few weeks before the election, and in part for that reason, as Mark mentioned, it in the beginning its sales outpaced those of A Fool's Errand. It ultimately only sold 50,000 copies, but you say only in comparison to 150,000 and to the 600,000 that A Fool's Errand ultimately sold. But how many novelists would be delighted to have 50,000 copies of their book sold? Both of these novels really did exert a tremendous influence, particularly on the factions in the Republican Party who saw that the let the South alone policy of Rutherford B. Hayes had failed miserably, and who wanted to do something about this. James G. Garfield, the Republican candidate, he attributed his electoral victory, which was very narrow, to, in part, the influence of Tourget's novels. He read both Bricks Without Straw and A Fool's Errand, and his inaugural address called for federal aid to education in the South, which was the thing that both novels ended with, and that was developed in 2 chapters at the very end of Bricks Without Straw. Tourget saw federal aid to education as the only thing that could salvage Reconstruction and ultimately build the kind of society he had tried to establish. He thought that by both educating blacks and therefore giving them a leg up in the system, and by re-educating whites, that this would help to counteract prejudice, and that this would ultimately be the route that would